Hey folks, welcome back to Game Garbage, where we take a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course, stream for fun. Today we're doing Cronos: The New Dawn, a full review. Finally beaten the game. I did my initial look after about 7 hours or so, and you guys actually voted for this year for me to do my full playthrough and review, and you guys will get to do that again in January, so look out for that. So yeah, I have finished the game, the first section. Most of this is going to be spoiler-free. I really stayed from a lot of any kind of spoilers, but I will get to a spoiler section toward the very end, and I will warn you. Let's go ahead and get started. So the story itself. You've dropped into the game knowing nothing. There is an infection that turns people to monsters and also use human tissue to build an organic structure to have further reach throughout the city. The origin and how to stop it is unknown. The organization you're a part of, and even yourself, is a mystery. The level design itself, well, everything is pretty much, there's darkness, there's lights failing, there's fog, there's horror sounds, tight areas, long corridors, and it's all there for a good horror time, right? And the jump scares, they're using all of those together to create that type of environment. Even in, quote, open areas, there are still objects that make it feel tight, and that's pretty much through the entire game. It's really good to poke in corners, and it's also good for your survival, because you'll usually find stuff that you'll definitely need. Usually you just find currency in the game to buy stuff at the store. But yeah, the level design is very reminiscent of Dead Space. I mean, when you're playing the game and you're thinking back to if you've played Dead Space, it feels very much the same. There's also plenty of ambush points. There's specific manual save points that you have to reach, but there are also some auto saves as well. There's also different monsters that have different abilities. This can make the ambushes actually quite hard in some cases, as there can be a lot of them. And there's also markers and indicators and boxes that make it easy to see the resources in the dark. But if you wish, you can actually turn some of that off if you wish to make it more difficult. So overall, the level design actually gets more complex as you progress through the game. So you'll see more linear areas, right? But then you'll get to a point where doors are locked, doors are chained up, or you got to figure out how to kind of solve a small puzzle to maybe get into that room that has resources, or to the areas in the maps actually get bigger. And there is one point where I would suggest that, at least the Bloober team themselves, that they actually have a map. Most of the time you're not going to need it, but I'll mention this a little bit later. Because definitely in the hospital, that gets pretty frustrating where you're trying to remember exactly where to go and what you need to do. But yeah, the progression does get more complex for the level design, and this is nice because you're not just linear anymore in small buildings. You're like multiple buildings, multiple floors, multiple rooms. It's actually a good area, and it's a good time. It really expounds on what the game has been building so far. But something that does get frustrating is part of the time you're just searching or trying to figure out where to go. Some of the specific things that you're supposed to find aren't incredibly specific. Maybe you're supposed to get some different elements, but again, you can't go back and read exactly what department those elements were in, like at the hospital. So it would be nice if that could be changed as well a little bit. Something to just reflect on. I'm not talking about markers in the game, okay, like Ubisoft. I'm not talking about that. But just something to refer back to get a little bit more detail. Because something you don't enjoy doing in the game is having to run around back and forth trying to find something or figuring out exactly what you're missing. The sound design, pretty much spot on. The quality of the sounds matches the environments or what you expect. And also it helps out with the jump scares, which is really good. The FX really deepens the immersion in the game. The weapon sounds are unique and punchy, which they sound really good. There's also indicator sounds as well as you're moving throughout and doing different stuff, so you can get info without having to look or having to check your inventory or whatever. And it's actually really cool that those indicator sounds are there once you learn them. The music, too, also fits the theme really well. The music is like this kind of 80s techno type of style for a lot of it, which is really good. And generally it matches the environment or the theme that you're in. There is one thing, though, where the music is a little overbearing, and this is at the parish or the church. So it'd be nice with the music up so high it's hard to hear audio, it's hard to hear indicator sounds. Even some of the game itself is difficult to hear because it's so overpowering with everything else. But the rest of it is good. The voice acting is pretty good as well for most of the main characters. Some of the sub characters are good as well. And while you don't get to really see all of these characters in the game, some of it is just being able to hear, right? And so you don't have any visuals in front of you, but the emotion that is able to come through with some of these voice actors is actually pretty well done. Higher quality than I anticipated. Let's talk about the performance of the game. It was pretty bad at first. I mentioned this in my initial look. On Xbox, I was losing anywhere from 30 to 35% of my frames, dropping from 59, 60 down to 40, sometimes 39 or something, or 45, and constantly shifting, jumping back and forth. And it made combat kind of frustrating, and it made me too not to want to turn around too quickly, because again, that frame drop was so insane. But even though in a small area, that definitely was a problem, or being in a room, turning too quickly, you could just see that frame drop. It also made streaming difficult, because while I have a fairly good internet connection, there was so much trying to be rendered up to the Twitch servers that it couldn't actually render it that well. So I had pixelation problems, and you actually get to see this through my entire playthrough. Toward the beginning, you can see those issues, and toward the middle and end, you don't really get to see those at all. So that pixelation simply disappears because the game becomes more optimized. Now, what was nice is that we did have 3 patches. Some of them, of course, fixed bugs and other issues, but each patch worked on making the game a better experience, more performant than the previous one. And all of those put together pretty much makes the frame rate now completely constant, barely moves at all. We're staying pretty much really consistent between 55 and 60 frames on Xbox, and it's really good. It helps me just focus more on the game, focus more of what I'm doing. That probably also made me experience and enjoy the latter part of the game a little bit more, because that immersion wasn't broken for me. It wasn't having performance issues. It wasn't distracting. I could just work on playing the game, and that was wonderful. So thank you guys for fixing that. They also made sure that the different patches worked on making sure that enemies weren't getting stuck, that HDR calibration was fixed. There was also quality of life improvements. There was also issues with achievement unlocks, which they worked on fixing that, and also various bugs. But yeah, the patch version 1.1 really improved the experience, again, with that performance. It was really nice to see that. The game mechanics themselves, this will be kind of a long-winded one, but there's a lot to go over. So the weapons and the upgrades. These can be upgraded with energy, which is a common resource, but you do need a lot of it. And then there's also suit cores that you can use on some different elements of your suit or the suit itself. There's also weapon attachments that can be found, giving you different types of weapons, and each one has their pros and cons with each. Some of these are easy to find, and others are going to be behind puzzles or really difficult if you don't poke around. What you upgrade and how far you upgrade to, well, that's really going to kind of shape the experience of the game. Because this is when, probably the second, kind of like the middle part of the game. The game's really broken up into 4 parts. So part 1 is very linear, very simplistic. It's just you getting used to the game. Part 2 and 3 is focused more on those upgrades and that expansion and bigger areas and introducing more characters. And expansion 4, or area 4, is more of the end game than anything else, of course, and getting you to New Game Plus. But it is really nice once you start getting to like part 2 and part 3 that you can start focusing on exactly how you want to play and what type of play style you're looking for. So with this variability of your weapons, variability of what your suit is, what type of attachments you can have, and upgrading your resource counts and all of that kind of stuff, or even finding different blueprints in the game, which there aren't too many of those, but there are a few, that does change and shape your experience. The resources in the crafting side of the game. There's a very limited amount that you can carry, but this can be upgraded, like I said, but there's only basically 2 types of resources. There's chemicals and then there's gears. And then for some of the upgrades, of course, you're going to also need energy, which is that more common resource that I mentioned earlier. So how they work on doing the crafting system is that different amounts and different combinations of chemicals and gears will ultimately make up all of the different type of stuff that you can craft in the game. And again, as you add more blueprints, you got to decide what you're going to craft, what you're going to build, because again, you can only find so many, you can only buy so many through the stores, and you can only hold so many at any given time. And since you can't exactly save whenever you want, well, you gotta do a little bit of planning, a little bit of resource management to ensure that you can walk through whatever crapshoot you're going to be experiencing around the corner. And so that's a really cool, kind of like a good survival element to the story and to the game. It's not overly complicated, but there is choice and variability there. And sometimes you're going to make the wrong decision. And so that's why we have save points. And they also have some automatic save points as well in the game. But no matter what, you're going to be able to have some of those choices and decisions. Some areas, too, also don't have a lot of resources available. So you really kind of got to get creative. When we take a look at the enemies in the game. Well, there's various enemies, and each one, again, focuses on something that they can do, but they can also upgrade themselves. Most of them can, the bigger ones. So a type of enemy is determined when it's first created or as its base, but then any humanoid can basically absorb a fallen enemy and then also add on to that trait, either increasing what they already have or adding a whole other thing on top of what they already have. So if they can spit acid, maybe now they're resistant to fire, which is one of your big kind of defensive mechanisms that you have in the game. Or maybe too, they kind of have in a way body armor. And so now you got to find a way to get through that. So as an enemy keeps absorbing more and more enemies, eventually they can ultimately have everything, and they will work on absorbing first initially, but then you usually have an ambush point as well where you have multiple enemies that are coming at you. So it is not in your best interest to let those enemies absorb. You got to try to take them down as quickly as you can, and that really does make for some pretty intense and fun experiencing fights in the game. But yeah, the biggest thing is going to be killing as efficiently as possible. We also have unique gear in the game as we get through section or chapter 2 and 3 in the game. And this can add to the types of puzzles that become available. Again, the beginning of the game becomes a little boring after a few hours. Like, there's really not a lot of meat on the bone, but it does get better as you play. But the unique gear itself is not overly going to change much of the game. Some of it is going to help with traversal. Some of it also is going to help focus on different tactics or what you can actually do or focus on. And then again, the game also gets more difficult as you go forward and also introduces new enemies. So while you're getting different gear, the game is also going to be changing and shifting as you're progressing through it. So it's not like it's really going to get easier. It's just that there's going to be different things that you can do to kind of combat different things. And this is where your playstyle actually gets really important. There's also cats in the game. Make sure you actually find those. Pretty much all of them will run away from you or they'll make sounds, but you make sure you want to find those in the game. There's also buffs through essences in the game, and each one is basically unique. Some of them are passive, some of them are active, but you can have basically 3 at any given time. All of this basically put together for all of the different mechanics that they have in the game creates the varied play styles and rewards for exploration and trying out new things. And it really depends on what you find and what you upgrade and how far you upgrade. That really does change your experience. Playing through New Game Plus, definitely the enemies are a lot more difficult and more challenging. But so far, I'm not seeing more enemies. I'm seeing the same ones, but they're just more difficult. But it is nice. I'm keeping all of my upgrades. I'm keeping all of my guns, all of my gear that I ever found. But it is going to feel a little bit different because maybe I've honed some of my playstyle, but again, that challenge of just more health now is going to be pretty interesting. And also, too, there's some things that I missed. So, yeah, I'm going to want to try to find some of those to get more of those achievements. Overall, let's talk about the actual rating itself. Metacritic had a 77 out of those critics. And also players had a 8.2 through 8.9, depending on what platform you're on. OpenCritic had a 76 for critics and a 90 for players. So that's pretty good. Again, the critics were pretty fairly in line with it, but the players were a little bit more varied, but they're fairly close. And most of them are actually better rated for players than what the critics had. My own personal rating is that when I did my initial look, I had a 6 out of 10. Now that I've actually played and beaten the game, I'm somewhere around a 7. But I wouldn't necessarily give it a high 7. It's more like a mid 7 or a low 7. My overall playtime is roughly 20 hours to go from the start all the way to the finish of the game. And again, you can see that through my entire playthrough. I have a playlist at Gaming Garbage 22 if you're interested in watching that. But yeah, ultimately my rating went up. And it's because they fixed the bugs. They improved the performance. And then all of that was pretty good. But the reason why it doesn't really go up is that the story is still very slow and kind of shallow in the beginning, and it's hard to kind of get into it until I get past that first extraction. But after, it does get more interesting, and there's more gear and there's more weapons. But, you know, this isn't exactly quite a point and shoot. And kind of like, what am I doing here? Like that's what makes the thing kind of slow in the beginning of the game, is I'm not really focused on trying to figure out things. It's like within the first hour, couple of hours, there's really not a lot of meat on the bone for that until a few more hours in. Again, until I get past that first extraction. But yeah, too, my score isn't really higher than an 8 because, again, the slow start, there's no map. They also reused some bosses and enemy types pretty often. And 2, the story is unfinished. So let's get into the spoilers a little bit. Ultimately, there's 2 endings to the game, and I've played through both. And the problem that I have is that no matter what ending you choose, nothing happens. It really doesn't matter. And everything that you've been doing all the way to that point and everything you've been working toward also doesn't matter either. So the story is very lacking and very unsatisfying at the end of the game. Now, if they plan on making a Cronos the New Dawn, I'm sure they're going to improve that. But one of the other issues is that some of the questions that I had at the very beginning of the game never got answered. So as a player, that's very frustrating. And yeah, again, no matter what you do, none of it really matters. It ultimately just keeps the loop going. Nothing changes. And all of the character development is essentially worthless. Also, too, everything you experience with your extractions that you're trying to do and with those characters and the cutscenes that we have, none of that really matters either, because none of it really changes or shifts to anything toward the end of the game. It's not included toward the end of the game or the end game itself. It's just kind of stuff to maybe pad your time, but again, there's really no focus or whatever. It does help create kind of the humanity of your character. But again, for those actual characters themselves, those subplot characters, there just really wasn't a point. And the essences, if you don't like them, are ultimately pretty worthless for the buffs that they give you in the game. So yeah, there's really no point to the character development. There's really no point to the story. There's no point to kind of the struggle that you have. While some of that is important about your humanity and what makes humans unique and all of that kind of stuff, the plot twist at the end is really good, but it shifts the story completely in a way where now everything that you've been doing really doesn't matter at the end of it. And that gets pretty frustrating. And 2, with all of the issues that the game has had with the story or with the performance issues or with the bugs, I gotta say to Bloober team that you guys are also the publisher. There's no excuse as to why some of that is unfinished or allowed to exist when we're paying full price for the launch of your game. That is incredibly frustrating. And you also used Unreal Engine 5, which almost everybody knows has performance bugs and problems. And again, those were left in the game anyway. So if you are going to work on making another game in Unreal Engine 5, Cronos the New Dawn or not, or some other IP, You can't allow that to be there. As a player, as someone that studies and researches and talks to other players and gamers and looks at reviews and stuff, something that the player base, regardless of the IP, really is not willing to accept anymore are performance problems. That performance better be as close to 60 as you can get and as consistent as you can get. They cannot be there, because if players are not going to focus, they're not going to focus their money in this type of economy, regardless of where you are in the world, to pay $60 or $70 for a game that doesn't feel finished or doesn't feel ready. Now, there were some progression bugs that they did fix pretty quickly, which, again, Bloober team were thankful for. But again, some of the other issues definitely show that the game wasn't ready, and maybe that's what affected your sales in the beginning. So let's talk about reception. The budget itself was roughly maybe $25 to $30 million for the making of the game, but this probably doesn't include the marketing and all of that other kind of stuff. Within the first month, we got to see through VG charts that they roughly had about 200,000 in sales, but this wasn't even close to what they needed really to make the game profitable. After this, they did make a demo that I think is just on Steam, maybe on PlayStation, but it's definitely not on Xbox. Also, for Black Friday, they discounted their game roughly 2 months after launch at 15% off. They also worked on bundling with other horror games like the Dead Space remake and with some of the others I can't remember their names of. But yeah, they also did several bundles, again, to try to work on garnering some of those sales that they needed. Because again, they hadn't even come close to breaking even yet. As of now, they have published and shared, the publisher themselves, Bloober Team, has showed that, yeah, they have over 500,000 in sales. And yes, that does roughly make them break even profitable, but just barely. And they need to have some more sales after that. And I do like what Bloober Team does. I did just buy the Silent Hill 2 remake. And yeah, I did enjoy Cronos the New Dawn for what it was. I think there's some really good elements that could have been there, and also some really good game design choices that they made that made it a wonderful experience. But there are some of these other things too that worked on holding it back, and probably also holding back on those sales, because they had an entire kind of like dev diary thing for multiple episodes that they had on the PlayStation channel, which is tens of millions of subscribers on YouTube. They also had a bunch of marketing too. There were also ads that they did, but still they didn't really have a ton in sales. And I think the thing that ultimately Bloober Team held the game back, again, is the performance issues, which I personally too am also not willing to accept. Because yeah, it's very frustrating to encounter that. And while yes, it is going to be fixed later, I don't want to buy a product that feels unfinished or broken. It's the same too with some of the other games that I've played this year or the year before, or even the year before that in 2023. It is very common for games to feel broken, to have progression problems, to have corrupted saves, to have performance issues, to have things that shouldn't even be in the game for a premium product, especially if that's what you're selling it for. And people just are exhausted from the deception and from the misguidance that marketing has. Because everything that we see, it doesn't say at the bottom, performance issues included. Right? And when we're buying a brand new game, it should work good out of the box. It doesn't even have to work great, but it should work good. At least good. So yeah, according to Bloober Team, they've at least broken even probably with their sales, which is good. And I hope they do make a Cronos the New Dawn too. I think they have a lot of stuff they can tap into. There's a lot of things they can dig into with the story. There's a lot of things they can explain, and there's a lot of things they could ultimately explore. And I'm hoping, Bloober Team, that you guys work on taking what you learned from making this one, getting any feedback that you can, and work on making the second game, or even bringing it to your next project. Because I'm glad that you guys are independent. I'm glad that you guys are passionate about making games, but we also can't have a game that doesn't feel finished at launch. So you guys have got to fix that. One thing too, just a piece of advice, this comes from Sweeney himself with Unreal Engine 5, is that if you're going to use Unreal Engine 5, think about performance at the beginning. of your development, not at the end. That's really how it's done the best way, according to Sweeney himself, and I hope that you guys ultimately do that. Because if you guys are doing a project, it's your money, it's your funding, you're the publisher, you're the developer, you're the quality tester. There's really no excuse for having a game that launched that way. And man, I want you guys to be a great and well-trusted studio, like From Software. And there's some others out there. I think Motive is another one. They're independent, and projects they've done themselves have been very, very good, just like the Dead Space remake. But with the economy, the struggle with money, the cost of what games are now, and everybody is struggling. So trust is key. Please work on doing that. So ultimately, I really enjoyed your game. I think it was good. But again, I have a hard time getting past that 7 because the story's really lacking and it's unsatisfying. I think a map would have been helpful, at least in the hospital. Even to just run around and find a map you can look at for the hospital. I'm not talking about the entire game. Most of it you don't even need it for that. But the hospital would have been nice, as there's multiple floors, there's multiple wings. That would have been nice to have. That would have saved me some time. And the other thing, too, is the performance. Man, that is just gotta go away. It's literally exhausting. So thanks for tuning in, folks. You can always follow me over at GameGarbage22, and there's various content every week. If something isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. You could skip right on through. Just wait for the next thing. Also, too, there's various playlists that have all of the content in there. That's how I separate it on the channel. So look through my playlists. And two, if you're interested in other playthroughs or you want to see the Cronos the New Dawn playthrough, those are there as well. And if you're like reviews, you can look through that too. And also, if you want to follow me over at Twitch, you can do that as well. That is at Don't Tread on the at Twitch. And yeah, when I have time to play, I'll definitely play. And I'll share stuff. And you guys voted to actually go through Dead Space. I'll be playing that in my own time, the whole series. And we'll be doing the remake as well. And then, yeah, don't forget to, in January, you guys get to vote for the next game. So I will make a video with different trailers of the games that I have picked, and then you guys basically get to help me pick that. And then ultimately, whoever has stuff in the comments, those games will basically be picked, and then there will be a poll the next week, and that will be the only poll. So be sure to look out for that. So with that, folks, hopefully you guys are doing well, and I'll see you guys on the next one.